Imagine walking into a luxury restaurant with everything money could possibly buy, and walking out having your entire life changed by a man who could barely afford his dinner. That is exactly what happened to a billionaire mother one ordinary evening. She had money, power, influence, a beautiful home, expensive cars, and a life most people could only dream about. But that night, sitting across the restaurant from a tired single father and his little daughter, she witnessed something that money could never purchase. And what she did next left the entire restaurant speechless. Before we begin, if you believe that one act of kindness can change someone's life, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because this story is not just about a billionaire or a struggling father. It is about dignity, sacrifice, family, and the unexpected moment when a stranger becomes the reason someone gets a second chance. The restaurant was one of the most expensive places in the city. Its enormous glass windows reflected the lights of downtown. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, soft music played in the background, and waiters moved between tables carrying plates that cost more than some families spent on groceries in a week. That evening, a black luxury car stopped outside the entrance. A woman stepped out. Her name was Victoria Hart. At 35, Victoria was the founder and CEO of one of the fastest-growing technology companies in the country. Newspapers called her a billionaire. Business magazines called her a genius. People who worked for her called her demanding but fair. But there was one title she valued more than all the others. Mother. Victoria walked into the restaurant holding the hand of her 8-year-old son, Ethan. Ethan was a quiet, intelligent little boy. Unlike most children his age, he had grown up surrounded by wealth but had never become obsessed with it. As they reached their table, Ethan looked around at the elegant restaurant. "Mom," he whispered, "can we get dessert tonight?" Victoria smiled. "If you finish your dinner." Ethan grinned. "Deal." They sat down, and for a few minutes, everything seemed normal. But then Ethan looked toward the entrance. A man had just walked inside. He was about 35 years old, wearing an old blue shirt and inexpensive black trousers. His shoes were clean but clearly worn. Beside him was a 7-year-old girl. She wore a simple pink dress and held her father's hand tightly. The man looked around the restaurant. For a moment, he seemed uncomfortable. He checked his wallet. Then he looked at his daughter. The little girl smiled. "Daddy, this place is beautiful." The man smiled back. "It is." But behind that smile was worry. His name was Daniel. Daniel had been raising his daughter, Lily, alone for 3 years. His wife had passed away after a long illness, leaving Daniel with a broken heart and a young daughter who still asked about her mother almost every night. Daniel had worked wherever he could. Construction jobs. Delivery work. Repair work. Anything that paid enough to keep food on the table. That evening was supposed to be special. It was Lily's 7th birthday. Daniel had promised her that they would have dinner somewhere nice. He had saved money for weeks. Not much. But enough, he thought. They sat down at a small table near the window. Lily opened the menu. Her eyes became wide. "Daddy, look. They have chocolate cake." Daniel looked at the price. His heart sank. The cake alone cost more than he had expected. He quietly closed the menu. Lily noticed. "Is everything okay?" Daniel forced a smile. "Of course." He looked at the menu again. He calculated the money in his wallet. If they ordered carefully, maybe they could afford one meal and a small dessert. But there was a problem. The restaurant prices were much higher than he had imagined. Still, Daniel refused to disappoint his daughter. He looked at her. "Choose something you like." Lily smiled. "I want the chicken." Daniel nodded. "Then chicken it is." The waiter came over. Daniel ordered the cheapest meals on the menu. When the waiter walked away, Daniel leaned toward Lily. And after dinner? He paused. We'll get that chocolate cake. Lily smiled brightly. Across the restaurant, Victoria had been watching. She wasn't staring because Daniel looked poor. She was watching because she recognized the expression on his face. It was the expression of a parent trying to hide a problem from a child. Victoria knew that expression. She had seen it in herself years earlier. Before she became wealthy. Before the company. Before the luxury cars. Before the billions. There had been a time when Victoria's own mother had worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table. Victoria remembered watching her mother come home exhausted and still smile. That memory never left her. She looked at Daniel again. Then she noticed something else. Lily wasn't asking for expensive things. She wasn't complaining. She was simply happy to be sitting beside her father. And that touched Victoria more than she expected. Ethan suddenly looked toward Lily. The 2 children made eye contact. Lily smiled shyly. Ethan smiled back. A few seconds later, Ethan whispered to his mother. Mom, can I say hello to her? Victoria nodded. Ethan walked over. Hi. Lily looked up. Hi. My name is Ethan. I'm Lily. What are you eating? Lily smiled. Chicken. Ethan laughed. Me too. Soon, the 2 children were talking like they had known each other for years. Daniel smiled as he watched them. Victoria smiled too. For a brief moment, the restaurant felt less like a place for wealthy strangers and more like a room filled with ordinary families. Then something happened. The waiter brought Daniel the bill. Daniel looked at it. His face changed. He reached into his wallet. He counted the money. Once. Twice. Then a 3rd time. He was short. Not by much. But enough. Daniel's hands began to shake slightly. Lily noticed. Daddy? Daniel looked at her. It's okay, sweetheart. But it wasn't. He had enough for the food. He didn't have enough for the dessert. And he didn't have enough to cover the unexpected service charge. He looked embarrassed. He quietly called the waiter. I'm sorry. There seems to be a mistake. The waiter checked the bill. There isn't a mistake, sir. Daniel swallowed. I don't have enough. The waiter looked uncomfortable. Sir, perhaps you could speak with the manager. Daniel nodded. His face was burning with embarrassment. Lily looked confused. Daddy, are we in trouble? Those words broke something inside him. Daniel crouched beside her. No, sweetheart. But you look sad. Daniel smiled. I'm just tired. At the table across the room, Victoria heard the little girl's voice. She looked at Ethan. Then she looked at Daniel. And suddenly, she stood up. Ethan looked surprised. Mom? Victoria walked toward Daniel. Daniel looked up. He didn't know who she was. Victoria stopped beside the table. Excuse me. Daniel stood. Yes? Victoria smiled gently. I couldn't help noticing. Daniel immediately became defensive. I'm sorry if we're causing a problem. Victoria shook her head. No. You're not causing a problem. She looked at Lily. It's her birthday, isn't it? Lily nodded. Yes. Victoria smiled. Then I think we have a problem. Daniel looked confused. What problem? Victoria pointed toward the dessert menu. That little girl hasn't had her birthday cake yet. Daniel stared at her. Then he shook his head. I appreciate your kindness, but I can't accept money from strangers. Victoria looked at him carefully. I didn't offer you money. Daniel paused. Victoria smiled. I offered to buy a cake. Daniel still hesitated. No. Really? Victoria interrupted gently. Mr. Daniel, sometimes accepting kindness is not weakness. Daniel looked at her. You know my name? Victoria pointed toward the reservation card on the table. Daniel looked down. He had forgotten it was there. Victoria continued. I know what it feels like to be embarrassed because you can't give your child what you promised. Daniel's expression softened. Victoria sat down across from him. My mother used to work 2 jobs. There were nights when she pretended she wasn't hungry so I could eat. Daniel said nothing. Victoria's voice became quieter. I never forgot it. Daniel looked at her. You don't have to explain. I know. Victoria smiled. That's why I'm not asking you to explain. Then she turned toward the waiter. Please bring the biggest chocolate cake you have. Lily's eyes widened. Daniel looked shocked. Victoria added. And bring enough dessert for everyone. The waiter smiled. Of course. Lily looked at her father. Daddy. Daniel laughed for the first time that night. Happy birthday, sweetheart. Soon, the table was filled with food. Ethan joined Lily. The 2 children laughed. They talked about school. Favorite cartoons. Favorite games. And, of course, chocolate cake. Daniel sat quietly, watching his daughter. He looked at Victoria. Thank you. Victoria nodded. You're welcome. But the evening was far from over. During dinner, Victoria noticed Daniel's hands. They were rough. Calloused. The hands of someone who worked with them every day. She asked him what he did. Daniel hesitated. Whatever work I can find. What does that mean? I repair machines. I do maintenance. Construction when I can get it. Delivery sometimes. Victoria was surprised. Why don't you have a permanent job? Daniel smiled bitterly. I did. He looked down. I worked at a manufacturing company for 8 years. What happened? The company closed the department. Victoria nodded. And after that? I applied everywhere. He looked at Lily. Eventually, the savings disappeared. Victoria studied him. What would you do if someone gave you a real opportunity? Daniel answered immediately. I wouldn't waste it. Victoria smiled. That wasn't what I asked. Daniel looked confused. She repeated. What would you do? Daniel looked at his daughter. I'd build a better life for her. Victoria nodded slowly. Then she said something Daniel never expected to hear. I may have a job for you. Daniel froze. A job? Victoria nodded. At my company. Daniel laughed nervously. You don't even know me. Victoria smiled. I know enough. She explained that her company had been searching for a skilled operations manager for months. Someone practical. Someone who understood machinery. Someone who could solve problems instead of simply talking about them. Daniel had exactly that experience. But there was something Victoria didn't tell him. She had already decided to investigate his background. Not because she didn't trust him. Because she wanted to make sure the opportunity was real. The next morning, Daniel received an email. An interview invitation. He stared at the screen. Then he looked at Lily. Daddy? Daniel smiled. We might have a new beginning. Lily hugged him. The interview wasn't easy. Daniel walked into Victoria's company wearing the best suit he owned. It wasn't expensive. But it was clean. He walked into the interview room nervous. Several executives sat around the table. They asked difficult questions. Daniel answered honestly. One executive asked him why he believed he could manage a department. Daniel replied, "Because I've been managing a household alone for 3 years. Every day has been a crisis. Every day I've had to solve problems. And every morning, I still had to get my daughter ready for school." The room became silent. Victoria looked at him. Daniel continued, "I don't know everything. But if I don't know something, I'll learn it." Victoria smiled. That was the answer she wanted. 2 days later, Daniel got the job. When he told Lily, she jumped into his arms. "You got it." Daniel laughed. "I got it." But the biggest surprise came 3 months later. Daniel wasn't just doing well. He was transforming the department. He found problems nobody else had noticed. He improved the workflow. He saved the company thousands of dollars. And employees respected him. Victoria realized she hadn't simply helped a struggling father. She had discovered a talented man who had been overlooked because life had pushed him down. One afternoon, Victoria walked into Daniel's office. "You know something?" Daniel looked up. "What?" "You're very good at this." Daniel smiled. "I told you I wouldn't waste the opportunity." Victoria laughed. But their children had become close too. Ethan and Lily became best friends. They studied together. Played together. And every few weeks, both families had dinner together. One evening, Victoria watched the children laughing. Daniel stood beside her. "You changed our lives," he said. Victoria shook her head. "No." Daniel looked at her. "You gave me a chance." Victoria smiled. "You changed your own life." Daniel looked at Lily. Then he nodded. Maybe she was right. Because sometimes people don't need someone to save them. Sometimes they simply need someone to see them. To believe in them. To open one door. And then let them walk through it themselves. Months later, Daniel received another surprise. Victoria promoted him to a senior leadership position. But this time, she didn't make the announcement herself. She asked Daniel to do it. He stood in front of the entire company. His voice trembled slightly. "I used to think success was about money." He paused. "Now I know it's about opportunity." Everyone listened. "I spent years believing I wasn't good enough because I couldn't get a job. But the truth was, I didn't need someone to tell me I was worthless. I needed someone to give me one chance to prove myself." He looked toward Victoria. And one person did. The room applauded. Victoria smiled. But Daniel wasn't finished. He looked at everyone. "So if you ever meet someone who is struggling, don't judge them by what they have today." He paused. "Because you don't know what they could become tomorrow." That evening, Daniel returned home. Lily ran toward him. "Daddy." He picked her up. "How was your day?" "Good." She smiled. "Are we still going to dinner with Victoria and Ethan?" Daniel laughed. "Yes." That night, the two families returned to the same restaurant where everything had started. They sat at the same table. The same chandelier hung above them. The same city lights shone through the windows. But everything was different. Daniel no longer looked embarrassed. He wasn't counting bills. He wasn't afraid of the menu. He wasn't wondering whether he could afford dessert. Lily opened the menu. She looked at her father. "Can I get chocolate cake?" Daniel smiled. "You can get 2."